Hello and welcome to Rise Up with Rebecca Seawright on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright, honored to represent the Upper East Side, Yorkville, and Roosevelt Island. Today we're talking about a subject on the show that touches every family, but is often left unspoken, and that's end-of-life care, bereavement, and the right to a dignified farewell. I'm honored to chair the Aging Committee in the New York State Assembly. I have the largest concentration of senior people living in any assembly district in Manhattan. And so I think today is especially important to focus on end of life care and what we can do to be prepared. For many New Yorkers, navigating loss can be totally overwhelming. Too often, families face confusion and pressure at one of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. That's why compassion and community based care are so essential. So today we have a guest with us that leads an organization that has transformed how Jewish families across New York experience end of life care. The Plaza Jewish Community Chapel is the first and only nonprofit Jewish community funeral home in New York. It was founded in 2001 to remove the profit motive from burial services and ensure that every family, regardless of means, is treated with respect and compassion. Joining us today is the Executive Vice President, Stephanie Garry of the Communal Partnerships at Plaza Jewish Community Chapel, a leader who has helped expand education and grief support throughout the Jewish community. So, Stephanie, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today. And tell us a little bit about your organization.
Thank you so much. A beautiful introduction, an important introduction, because you are so right. We all are going to have to navigate this landscape of end of life at some point. And so I'm really honored that Plaza is a resource for the community. As you said, we were established in 2001. We're about to celebrate our 25th anniversary. And we were established with the sole purpose of ensuring that everyone receive a dignified end of life experience, to also take the profit motive out of the equation, as you mentioned, and to provide education and bereavement support around end of life conversation. We feel that that is an area in life that we don't really talk about. Though I will tell you, over these past 25 years, I've seen a change in that conversation. Whereas 25 years ago, nobody talked about it, definitely today, more and more and more people know that they need to address it. They want to address it to ensure that this burden of what am I going to do when mom dies is not left on those they care about the most. And so we've really done a wonderful job of amplifying this conversation and making sure that this conversation is accessible to people, not only at Plaza, which is located across the park from you, though so many of our families and constituents come from the east side of Manhattan, but we've also brought this conversation into synagogues and community centers and nursing homes and senior living environments all over New York. And I'm really happy and proud to say we've done that for sure.
Well, that's terrific. And as the chair of the Aging Committee in the legislature, I know how important it is to talk about these subjects, to financially plan for them. And you do a lot of programming at different venues around the city.
Mhm.
Talk to us a little bit about some of the programs that you've administered.
Sure. So it's very interesting. When we started the chapel, we thought, how are we going to amplify this conversation? So we've done that in a couple of ways. First of all, our board of directors, which has over 60 people on the board, 27 of them are clergy from all denominations, from various synagogues and Jewish communal organizations in New York. So they have partnered with us to make sure that we are bringing this conversation to people. In addition to that, we've gone into various places and our conversations vary. Everything from Taking the Mystery Out of Death, which is a program we do for middle age students in schools to a program all about Jewish ritual at the end of life. We do that in a variety of venues. And a really important program we do is called Getting Your House in Order. And when you think about that,
Mm-hmm.
it's true. We need to get our house in order. We need to talk about estate and trust planning. We need to talk about advance directives. We need to talk about funeral planning. All those pieces are part of the puzzle that we need to put together when we talk about end of life. And so these programs contain professionals who speak about the importance of estate and trust planning. Attorneys who specialize in this present with us. And we have on staff here a pre-plan director, a certified pre-plan director, who talks to you about why you should think about pre-planning a funeral. I've thought about it. I've made the arrangements. I've pre-planned my funeral because one thing I can tell you, Assemblywoman, is that I've worked here at the chapel for 24 of its 25 years, and we don't know when our last day is on this earth. We think we might know, but we don't know. And so we need to be prepared. We need to have these conversations, and we need to ensure that when we have these conversations, we express our wishes for what I see for myself when I die. Not always the easiest conversation, but it's part of our life cycle. And I do believe having these conversations really brings us a bit closer to living because it's a conversation I don't have to have anymore. We talk about everything from organ donation, because you have to remember that when somebody decides to donate their organs, it's usually because a traumatic accident has taken place. So
Mm-hmm.
nobody is really able to have that conversation at that time. So it's really important that you've had that conversation beforehand. So there's a lot to think about in these moments, and these conversations are quite beautiful, I have to say.
Well, that's a very good, important point that you've made, that, you may become incapacitated and not able to make that decision on whether you would want to be an organ donor. And so the time to do it is before the decision really has to be made. Make
Exactly,
it
exactly,
early.
for
So,
sure, for sure.
what are some of the top questions that people ask when they meet with you or hear your presentation?
Well, I will tell you that when I'm talking to younger students, the first question I always get from them is, how do you know if somebody's really died? So that, of course, is a great question that we get. But the truth is, we do not bring anybody into our care at the chapel until a death certificate has been signed. And so that is done at a hospital, or it's done by a doctor. If there is
Mhm.
hospice care, it's done by someone who is official. And so once that death certificate is signed, we can bring someone into our care. And let me just say to you, I am not a licensed funeral director. I've had the honor of working side by side our funeral directors for, as I said, 24 years, but we have 6 funeral directors here who work with the families and make those arrangements. Some of the other questions that I get from people are, I don't want to have this conversation with my mother because it depresses her. And I want to tell you that I have found that when the conversation is presented in a supportive, loving way, people
Mhm.
do want to talk about it. They do want to talk about it because we are so busy making decisions all day long about our lives, where we're going, where we're traveling to. But this important decision, if we don't make that decision, then what happens in that moment when someone dies is a lot of raw, high emotion, and people are not able to make clear, well thought out decisions at that time. In addition
Mhm.
to that, I really want to add, it's not inexpensive to die. It's expensive to go to a funeral chapel, to pay the costs, to open and close a grave, to purchase a grave. there's a lot involved here. So if there's been no conversation around it, when somebody dies, we've been there. We know what that moment feels like. And now I've got to think about where my mom wanted to be buried. I don't even know if there's a cemetery plot, if anybody owns anything, because a conversation hasn't taken place. So there are a few things that I want to drive home. And that is number one, everybody needs to have this conversation because we're all going to die, as I said initially. Hopefully, people live a long, beautiful life and they're surrounded by love at the end of life. And we know that doesn't always happen. So, people have to talk about it. They need to talk about what they see in terms of what they want for their end of life experience. Some people opt for cremation and some people want to be buried with, in a family plot, and other people don't. And what's happening now is families are so spread out. It's not like everybody lives on the Upper East Side anymore, right?
Right.
And so we see people who have kids in Des Moines and San Diego, and somebody says, "Who's going to come visit my grave if I'm buried on Long Island?" So, again, another reason that we really encourage people to talk about what their expectations are. And lastly, I will say on this topic that I will share personally that when my mom was 82, I was given the task, of course, of sitting down with her and asking her what she wanted her funeral to look like. And she told me everything that she wanted. And what a gift that was to me, because when she died at the age of 98, she couldn't have told me a thing. And so the day of her funeral, I gave her everything she wanted, and that was an enormous gift for me. So, it's
Mhm.
all about really caring for the person who is about to die, perhaps, but also caring for ourselves in these moments.
And there's no substitute for preparation. And what you did with your mother when she was 82 was preparing
Yep,
while she still had the ability to tell you what she wanted, which is fabulous.
it was
What
beautiful.
is the difference between the profit and the nonprofit of the funeral chapels or
Sure.
funeral homes?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So when Plaza was established by, I want to tell you, UJA Federation and the Jewish Communal Fund put up the initial money along with a group of philanthropists. And one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to be completely transparent about how much a funeral costs. Um, I will tell you, to this day, it's very hard to find out on some websites how much a funeral costs. And so Plaza not only posts our own prices, but we post the prices of our competition simply because we want to be transparent. And again, when we talk about being a nonprofit, we talk about the fact that yes, we still make money because we have to keep the lights on, and we have to pay our funeral directors and everyone who works here. But we didn't have to make the kind of profit that other chapels who are for profit are making. And so you will see a dramatic difference on our price comparison page. So the profit motive that we've taken out of the equation definitely has to do with the dollar amount of how much a funeral costs. In addition to that, as a nonprofit and a community chapel, we really feel that it's imperative that we create community by talking about this conversation, and we support the community. So we really pride ourselves on meeting everybody where they're at. We
Mhm.
are not here to make the world more Jewish, but we are here to serve the community, which includes those who were not raised in Jewish tradition necessarily. We serve
Mhm.
everyone who walks in our door.
And you host nearly 50 educational programs every year, along with podcasts and seminars, webinars, partnerships with synagogues and the
Yes.
Jewish Book Council. How do you see these programs helping normalize conversations about mortality and grief and end of life
Mm,
challenges?
I so appreciate that. That's a beautiful question because you used a word that I am a fan of, and that is normalizing this conversation. Um, that's exactly what we do. We want to keep, chipping away at the tree. I like to refer to it as that's what we're doing because the more we talk about it, the more realistic it is for people, the more real it is for people, and the more palpable it is for people. Yes, we launched a podcast called Exit Strategy, and you can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts. We have recorded over 60 episodes to this point. We have tens of thousands of followers, which is remarkable and very telling to let you know that people tune in because they they want to hear about what we're talking about, and we talk about everything from when you lose a parent to a traumatic loss to how to talk to children about death to how to pre-plan a funeral, to talk about organ donation. And we do it with clergy, we do it with professionals, we do it with comedians. For instance, Nick Kroll, who I'm sure many people have heard of. Nick has been on our podcast to talk about Can Death Be Funny? So these are 20-minute episodes. They get to the point of what everybody's talking about. We recently had a guest on talking about how is AI affecting the world of death and dying. And people now are making avatars of those who have died with their voices. So something, quote unquote, lives on. So, how does that affect the process of grief or doesn't it? Or so a really interesting conversation. So I think that there's so much out there to talk about. As I look across my office, I'm looking at about 35 books that have been sent to me over the past couple of months from authors who would like to be on the podcast to talk about, their slice of what this end of life conversation is all about.
Hmm. And from your vantage point, what is the biggest barrier that families face when trying to plan for end of life and a dignified burial? And what do you see the biggest, greatest unmet need in the communities?
I would probably say that many people don't believe they're going to die. I know that sounds like crazy, but I think they don't want to talk about it because they don't really think it's going to happen to them. So that would be number one. Number two, they don't think about the true burden that's left on those they care about most. So
Hmm.
I have heard many people say, you know what, when I die, it's going to be my kids. They're just going to have to deal with it. And I'm here to say, those kids, they're going through a rough moment. And if mom hasn't told me what she wants, then am I doing the right thing, in that moment? Um, and that to me is one of the greatest barriers. I'm really thrilled to say that over the course of these 2.5 decades, that's changed. That's changed. As I said earlier, we have a pre-planning funeral director who's a specialist, and the number of appointments that he has just exploded in terms of people saying, I don't want to leave this for my kids to decide. I want to do what I want. I'm going to make the arrangements. And when I die, nobody has to do anything other than pick up the phone and call Plaza. And it really is that simple. It can be a plan that is paid in advance. So from a financial point of view, you check it off the list like you do with a will. But one of the things I want to say is you can't put your funeral arrangements that you desire in a will because a will is read long after someone is going to be buried or cremated or whatever. And so
Hmm.
it's very, very important that you keep things separate and that you need to talk about funeral arrangements and a will and estate and trust planning for sure. But
Hmm.
I think the barriers are are lowering themselves a bit. Yet, I think we still have work to do by talking about this. It's much like, Plaza just co sponsored a program talking about hospice and palliative care. Where has it come from, 25 years ago? Where is it going? And it's another conversation that has grown a lot over the past quarter century. And so
Mhm.
I think funeral arrangements and funeral planning and end of life has grown as well in that same way.
Mhm. And how can people reach you in the Plaza Jewish Community Chapel? Do you have a phone number, website?
We've got a lot. We've got a lot. So we are plazajewishcommunitychapel.org or plazajewish.org. We've got a very robust website. Many things are on that website, including conversations around perinatal loss and how to talk to children about death and what to do when someone dies, literally. Of course, we have a Facebook page and an Instagram account. And of course, we have our podcast exit strategy. So you can find us a lot of ways for sure. And our phone number is 212-769 4400. That's 212-769 4400.
And two more questions. What's the average cost that people pay for a funeral? I know there's no substitution to transparency, and you said that you've even listed for profit on your website.
Sure, because we're the only not-for-profit in the New York area, we have listed the prices of those who are for-profit because that's the major funeral chapels in New York. So a funeral at Plaza is about $8,000, and again, that's about 20 to 30% less than some of our competition, and even significantly more with other competition. That doesn't include the price of what takes place at a cemetery. Some cemeteries charge $1,000 to open and close a grave. Other cemeteries charge $3,500 to open and close a grave. So it depends on when the funeral is, what day of the week it is, if someone is being buried on a holiday. And so those are the things that people don't necessarily know or think about, let alone
Mhm.
if somebody has to buy a grave. And a grave can cost anywhere from $1,500 to $25,000 a grave. We deal with over 100 cemeteries in the metropolitan New York area, and that includes Connecticut and New Jersey and Westchester as well.
Uh-huh. And now, someone one time said that you can go on to Costco now and buy a casket.
Yeah, and you can, and this is an interesting fact that again people don't know, but every cemetery has different dimensions for the graves. So somebody could buy a casket at Costco and send it to us, but it won't fit in the grave of where they're going to, when where somebody's going to be buried. So the casket goes back and they accomplish nothing. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of information that people need to know when when they're planning a funeral. Again, why people should talk in advance about this.
And what is the best recommendation on how you suggest that families bring up this topic that are very afraid to raise it with mom or dad or grandparents
Yeah,
because they just feel it's an uncomfortable subject?
I
What's the best way to kind of break that ice and get a family member to talk about or have a conversation on end of life?
I think that is without a doubt the big barrier. People get nervous that they're going to hurt someone's feelings. So the best time to talk about this is when you don't have to talk about it. When everybody is well and everybody is gathered, we've also seen intergenerational conversations around this because it's part of our life cycle. And the more we talk about it, I'm not suggesting you talk about this all the time, but the more we talk about it, the easier it is. It's like when I teach kids about what happens when someone dies? I say everything dies in life, the
Mhm.
cycle, the circle of life. And so I really recommend when you don't have to have the conversation, you have it. You do this in a loving way, like I did with my mom. I said, I'm here to ensure you have what you want. I didn't start the conversation with, all right, let's talk about your funeral. I started it with, my responsibility as your daughter is to ensure that you have what you want, just like you've always cared about what I want. And she really, she was open to it from the beginning, but that meant a lot to her. And it was all about me being the dutiful, respectful child having this conversation.
Mhm.
Or friend.
And
And by the way, yeah, or that can be with a friend, because there are single adults out there who need to have these conversations, and they need to have a point person in their life who knows these things. Otherwise, I've heard stories that people end up in Potter's Field because nobody knew who they were and what they wanted. And so there's a lot of business to take care of as we age, and I'm a big believer in that, and I have a podcast about that as well.
great, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'm very impressed with the work that you do. Are there other nonprofit Jewish chapels that exist around the country? I know you said you're the only one in New York.
Yes, yes. The original one is in San Francisco. It's called Sinai Chapels. It was established about 150 years ago. But the other ones, there are about a handful, as I said, across the country. But we in New York, I will tell you, are blessed to have this resource for the community, just on a variety of levels. And our board of directors and our community partners, of which there are so many, it's an honor to be in this conversation in partnership with everyone. And for you, thank you for elevating and amplifying this conversation. You're a real champion for us, and I thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the work that you do. And again, I just thank you and appreciate the subject matter, and that you're going into schools and teaching children and adults and family members how to talk about what can be a difficult subject and how to normalize it. So thank you, Stephanie, for coming on the show. And I want to thank all our viewers for tuning in to Rise Up with Rebecca on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network.